The CS for the National Treasury, Ukur Yatani, is tomorrow expected in Parliament, in the National Assembly, to deliver the budget statement for this year. In this budget, he is basically going to talk about how he wants to spend 2.73 trillion shillings in the next financial year and how he wants to raise 2.7 trillion shillings in the next financial year. We know that KRA in the last year or so has been raising about 1.5 trillion. Kenyans have actually been paying tax to the tune of 1.5 trillion shillings. We had a conversation here with a senior manager at the KRA, and he was telling us about their desire to widen the tax net. And this is the time when we were talking about the TTT, what's it? The tax for the small organizations, small companies, right? And he was basically telling us how they want to go ahead and start taxing Mama Mboga, start taxing kiosks and such, and how they were going to roll it out. Now, in this new proposal by Ukur Yatani, which has already been presented to Parliament, they have come up with a new avenue that they want to tax. And this is digital economy. Digital economy, if you think about how the digital e-commerce has basically grown in the country over the last couple of years, is now we have platforms that are offering music, video, platforms that are offering you to actually purchase goods, and the goods are delivered right to your doorstep. Platforms that are allowing you to offer your services online. For example, CT Muga wants to train a group of people. He basically just goes into a platform and he has an online course. That online course now, CT, you need to pay tax for it, and there has to be VAT on it. So KRA is now looking at raising VAT through those value-added tax through those online services, and also income tax on those online services. It has basically gotten to a point where people are really confused. What are you saying? Are you saying that now services like Uber and other taxi hailing apps are going to attract VAT? Are you saying that if I buy things off an online platform in Kenya and it's not even domiciled in Kenya, I need to pay VAT? Are you saying that if I want to post something on Facebook and I want to promote the post to reach more people because I'm selling a certain service, then now Facebook has to add some VAT element into it? What exactly does it all mean? If I come up with a website and on this website I allow people to come in and subscribe, does it call for that? When you talk about e-paper, Standard has an e-paper platform and people are subscribing onto it. Now we're saying that we add VAT into it. So we need to understand what this all means and what does that portend to small businesses that are looking at this as an avenue basically to look into this one, grow as a business, and make your income from there.
All these taxes, and they assume that the businesses are going to grow.
That's the other question. How do you support the growth of this business or this particular sector? Have we reached a point where in this country we can say our e-commerce has actually matured, now we can start reaping from it? Or are we still at that stage where we are saying, let's nurture this, let's allow this to grow so that we get to a point where we can now look at them as revenue streams? It requires a lot of understanding.
It does.
And let's ask these questions to the people who understand these things. We are joined by a partner of Aviva Africa Consulting, Edward Mwachinga. Edward understands matters of tax and law. Edward, good morning.
Good morning, Eric. How are you today?
Salama kabisa. Good to have you back on the show, Edward.
Thank you for having me again.
So you've just had the introduction that I've given. I'm even trying just to understand what exactly is the government trying to do here. Where are they heading? What's the agenda?
Okay, yeah. Thank you, Eric, for inviting me to discuss this subject. So what you have seen, yes, you have described what has happened with the finance bill. And also, perhaps a few weeks back, the minister also introduced some regulations for the implementation of a provision in the VAT Act, so as to levy VAT on this digital economy. It's part of a wider effort by the policymakers to widen the tax base. which is something that you, as you have correctly said, they started with the turnover tax.
That's the one.
Then
Turnover tax.
then
You are looking
yes,
at me
not
like
TOT.
TOT, yes.
Yes. So, and then you remember when at the advent of this COVID-19 situation, the president came in and made some tax pronouncements, behind which, of course, there was a bill that did a lot more than he said. And in that bill, in that act now, they reorganized a lot of exemptions from income tax and VAT perspective. So all this, there's sum total of all these efforts, and now this introduction of these regulations and the finance bill and so on is to widen the tax base. That's what they're trying to do. And especially now that the top rate of income tax came down, corporate tax rate came down. So this widening the tax base is going to balance the revenues for them. That's a script.
That's their thinking.
That is their thinking. And you might ask, why now? You've asked why now? Should we not nurture the digital economy or the e-commerce and so on? I think the argument they will make, or they are making, is that there is need for tax equity so that everybody pays their fair share. It's not fair for you and I to be paying 25% on our incomes, and some people who are doing business through e-commerce don't pay anything. So it's also a move to increase equity, let everybody pay some money, and widen the tax base, not just to digital economy, but to other also hard to tax sectors.
So if I'm to understand what you're saying, is that there seems to have been an admission that there was an unfairness to the taxing system. So as to balance it out, they brought in another cluster of Kenyans who previously were not paying tax to pay tax. Is that the thinking behind it?
I think that what you say is that there is always an effort to bring more fairness. I don't think that anyone admits that there is an unfairness, but to bring more fairness. So when there is a lot of people with exemptions, for example, I personally, think that is good. That you limit the exemptions very much, spread the burden, and then reduce the tax, so that then the burden is less for everybody.
Let's get to that definition first of all, or even just a description. What is this e-commerce that what areas of e-commerce are we targeting?
Okay, so now what the way that this has been defined. So we'll have to split the VAT and the income tax. The income tax is new. The VAT is not. So with the VAT, there was a provision that was introduced when the new VAT Act came in 2013, where they defined this type of services as electronic services, and further subdefined them, and listed the services, including websites, web hosting, software and updating of software, self-education packages, stuff like that. Okay, so now what has happened now is that the regulations that were published have expanded that list to include what you spoke about, e-papers and others. Yeah, if these supplies take place in what they are calling a digital marketplace. Now, a digital marketplace is defined as a platform where the buyers and sellers interact directly. So the platforms that you talked about, say Uber, would be one such example, or Amazon, where you go in, you buy something, Now, from the VAT perspective, these regulations are only applying if the supplier is a person outside the country who is selling directly to a consumer like you inside the country in a B2C transaction. So it doesn't apply to a person who is here in Kenya who is doing the same. It's only for the person outside supplying directly. So like a Netflix is giving you a movie.
Yeah.
When you download that movie, VAT becomes applicable.
So now Netflix basically is
yeah.
going to attract a 14% extra charge for
Yes.
VAT.
Absolutely. And then what the regulation also does is that then, because, these people are not around and so on, it's creating a simplified method for them to register for VAT and be able to comply. That's the import of those regulations. There are some few technical issues that might be sorted out during this public participation, but that's the import.
So
on the income tax perspective, however, is different. That applies to everybody, whether you're here or you're outside. So if you are providing services through this digital marketplace, then this digital services tax is applicable.
And is this at what percent?
Okay, so the digital services tax is at 1.5%, and the base of is a little bit controversial because it's on what is called the gross transactional value. Now, if I give you an example, you go into an Uber, the Uber person charges you 200 shillings.
Your trip,
right? The taxi for your trip. Uber itself gets paid, say, 20 shillings.
Okay.
It's not clear whether that 1.5% is on the 20 shillings
or on the 200.
So that is earned by Uber because Uber has made the service, or on the 200, which is the gross transaction value.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. That's one of some of the issues that maybe should be sorted out with this parliamentary process, and if there'll be regulations that will be issued thereafter.
Edward, there always seems to be, every time something like this comes up, when an announcement has been made by KRA and the powers that be of a new tax every now and then, it has been met with animosity often. Is this really primarily a way to widen the tax base, or is it an avenue through which then KRA hopes to meet its threshold of collection of funds?
Yeah, so that is, that's the big question, yeah? You see, in a proper, tax policy, you want stability in your tax policy. So you don't make changes every now and then, You make changes and then you let that play out, and then you make changes much later and so on. The trouble here is that there's been quite a number of changes, sometimes being done in a way that some may call in an ad hoc manner, so that then it looks like it's just an effort to plug gaps, as opposed to creating a good, stable fiscal environment that allows those sectors that the country believes to be strategic to thrive. Yeah.
So because I'm looking at this and thinking of the entertainment industry, for instance, if I think of Safaricom and the Skiza tunes, this is one where the person, the purchaser, is interacting on the platform with the seller. So this will attract now this particular tax, right?
Yes.
Now we are coming to from a point where the government itself, through the president, has been trying to really promote this sector, to say we are going to ensure that our local creators have various avenues of selling their product, or selling their product, their music, their videos and all. And then suddenly you come and impose this tax. Basically what you're saying is you're making it more expensive for consumers to buy music on these platforms.
Yes, you are. Yeah. It will of course trickle down to the consumer, because the business people try to expand their margins, and it's not imaginable that they will absorb this and not pass it on. So things will become more expensive. But there is something else that should be of interest to you and to the listeners. This conversation about the digital economy is happening all over the world. Now, in the discussion around the world, there is also some move to bring consensus, an international consensus on how the economy should be taxed. Now, I don't know if you may have seen that recently, in fact, 2-3 days ago, the U.S. Department of Trade instituted investigations into the proliferation of digital services tax in countries that are targeting U.S. companies. In France, it was called the GAFA tax. Google, Apple,
Facebook,
Facebook, and Amazon. So the U.S. is on one side of the spectrum because it is protecting its
own
innovators.
Companies. Yeah.
Yes. On the other side of the spectrum are recipient countries who are more focused on collection of a piece of the pie. Now, in Kenya is a big hub for development of, these kind of platforms. Yes. We have companies like Cellulant who are going all over the world, taking their payment platforms and so on.
Yep.
As a country, we must have a coherent policy that balances our need to collect money and the need and the interest of our businesses that are going out. So whatever policy that we espouse will be used against us by other countries.
Yes.
Now, if we make it very difficult and we just want to collect, other countries will want to do the same to our business people who are going out and make them perhaps not able to access those markets. So we need to have this kind of a balance and some coherence in our policy that looks at all these perspectives and not just collection.
Edward, I've always been of the opinion that it is not possible for a country to reach economic development on taxes alone. And it seems as if that is one of the, even when we look at budgets, for example, I think that the majority of the funds that will be looked for come from taxes, whether that be domestic, across board, right? That's where they look at the bulk of this money will come from. And I say that it is not possible to be able to run a country in that manner, using those funds alone.
Yeah.
If we were to come from a position of assistance when it comes to observations, what then should an authority be looking at when it comes to being able to collect? Because if we look at KRA and look at this, in the last 6 years, they've not been able to reach the threshold. Every year they've fallen short of what they have right. So how then should they be going about this? Is it setting lower targets? Is it setting more realistic targets? Is it looking at the landscape of the country and saying, then this is what we should be able to do? How should they go about this?
Yeah, so in layman terms, you'd say that they would have to look at realistic targets. But there is a more philosophical kind of argument that needs to be made. Whether we are a fiscal conservative country or, we are liberal. In fiscal conservative countries, they say that you allow the private sector and the private citizens to allocate the resources in the economy. So you don't give the money to the government and for the government to then allocate. You allow the private citizens and so on to keep as much of it as possible, which means that you keep your taxation low. That's the argument you hear in the States all the time. Tax cuts and this and that. That's the argument, that's the philosophical argument they're having. On the one hand, people want to tax a lot and use the money for welfare. On the other hand, they say, no, you let the business people have the money and the citizens have the money and let them be the ones who allocate that money into the sectors of the economy for growth. I don't think that there's a right or wrong answer, but you need to have some kind of policy as a country, one way or the other, and follow it so that you're not yo-yoing between, those two.
The issue of policy, you've mentioned it a number of times already in this conversation. Do we have that kind of policy? Do we have any thought towards having a harmonized policy?
Eric, I give a lot of benefit to people. I know some of those fellows in the tax policy. They are good, decent people, and they are trying to let us have some kind of coherent policy. But of course, these things are always influenced by the need also to collect. And sometimes there is incoherence. This VAT discussion is a case in point. So by these regulations, what you can see the policymakers are asserting is what is called the destination principle for VAT, where you assert your right to tax because the consumption is happening in your country. Okay? So, and that is good and fair. But on the other hand, you'll hear them also talking about trying to tax exports of services where the consumption is happening in another country. So there is that kind of lack of coherence, and you can see that the aim is to maximize collection.
So the thinking behind everything is how much money can we collect?
Can we get?
For now, not even thinking about the posterity and what that's likely to do in terms of growing the economy or even shrinking the economy.
Yeah, a lot of the efforts give that impression. It's collection.
But this collection seems to be spurred on by the projected budgets that we have. What is it that stops the country from simply using what you've collected? Budgeting with what you've collected?
Why can't we budget for 1.6 trillion shillings?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So I think that these things are always led by the projections and the people and promises. So if we promise to build railways and roads and so on, and we look at our sources of money and see that we cannot get that 2 billion, we are only getting 1.6, then you put together a team and task them to widen the tax base and collect. So it's a vicious cycle, City. I think that we have to start by saying that as a country, we need to be spending in this kind of a region, not have too many programs, too much waste, and so on, such that our thirst for funds is insatiable.
So you're telling us to stop applying pressure on our politicians, because politicians make those promises based on the pressure that we apply on them. What is it that you're going to do for us if we vote for you?
We put too much pressure. And also, of course, it's no secret that a lot of our money also leaks a lot.
Yeah.
So now, in order to balance the numbers, we have to keep the collections high.
I like that you said it's because money leaks.
It's a very, very polite way.
It's a very polite way of putting it in terms of how the money kind of disappears from existence. So just looking at how things now may change over time. I understand that, as an authority, KRA is meant to collect. That's their job. That's their mandate in terms of what they're supposed to do. Now, in terms of creativity, longevity of an idea, or saying that, we can either tax these businesses or these individuals to the bone, or we can come up with something that is going to allow us to do it for a longer period of time and keep people comfortable. Do you think that the comfortability of individuals and companies in this country is one thing that will come into the minds of the authority, the tax authority, for example, and say, actually, it is something that we should do to make sure that we can collect for longer?
There is a lot of frustration from taxpayers. Because taxpayers feel that there is too much pressure on them without perhaps understanding, and that's in general. There is, of course, some very good officers here and there, and sometimes some good experiences. But on the average, there's a lot of frustration. What the sentiments that are out there is that there is not too much care for the sustainability of business when that is brought against the need to collect.
Now, let's look back at what you were talking about. The one of the things that's driving the authorities to come into taxing the digital economy is they want to widen the tax bracket. Those are words that they keep using every time. Widening the tax bracket. widening the tax net. However, Edward, over the years, it appears to me that they keep going to tax the same group of people in different ways. It's the same Edward, but now we started to tax you because you've bought a shirt. We tax you for buying a tax. We tax you for buying food. We tax you for earning a salary. We tax you for buying spectacles. We tax you for going to the hospital. We tax you for everything, but it's the same Edward. Is that widening a tax net really?
Yeah, maybe it's deepening. Because widening would mean that you are catching those you have not taxed.
Yes.
And not increasing the effective tax rate of those that you are already taxing.
Exactly.
So, look, a lot of these things are also perception, yeah? Because our tax system is a standard tax system. I think what you can be concerned about is many times it's the administration. Yeah.
What is the administration?
Yeah. So the administration, you see, you have audits and you have this and that. You have another monster called the VAA, and many times creating, increasing the compliance burden and so on. These are the things that many people are concerned about, but they perceive this as just an increase of taxes here and there without control. Yeah.
Is there any way that KRA can get more creative and actually widen the tax bracket? Go to other sectors or to people who are not paying tax and find a way of, even if you're collecting a small percentage, but you're able to collect. So yes, turnover tax was one way of looking at it, but even how they rolled it out and how they went about educating the public on it, I think was wrong.
Yeah. So first of all, and I appreciate that misconception that it is KRA that widens the tax base, because it's the tax policy experts at Treasury. Although KRA is so heavily involved in that process, such that many times people see KRA and Treasury as one and the same thing when it comes to tax policy. But to be fair to them, they are trying to widen the tax base, and in fact, this regulations and the introduction of this DST is one such effort. They try. These guys are bright people. You will see next week, of course, you guys will be talking about what is in the finance bill, perhaps more comprehensively. You will see other measures that are in there that are meant to widen the tax base. So they're creative. They try. There's no perfect tax or perfect system. Sometimes there is issues that arise from their efforts, but hopefully the public participation efforts can help to iron those issues. But they do try. What you have, and people are concerned about mainly is after the law has come into place, the administration and also the frequent changes. So you may have seen maybe 2 weeks ago, last week, there was a remission for excise duty on alcoholic drinks made from sorghum and so on.
Yes.
That was, started, it's been changing every now and then. Yeah. And it has recently changed again, So those kind of things are not good things. Because
this is the one that made Kenya breweries issue a protest, because they're saying now keg is going to be more expensive. And the reason why they were even going into this market is to address a need by the country. We had seen a number of cases where illicit brews had increased, and the government had encouraged a big brewer like Kenya Breweries come up with a product that can address this market, but a product whose quality of production we can vouch for.
Yes, so there are examples like those ones where our system encourages investment in certain sectors. But then the policy or the fiscal environment does not stay stable for enough time for this investor to perhaps recoup their investment. It changes, so those frequent changes, those kind of things, administration and so on, those are the things that cause concerns in our system.
And you still say they are bright people.
Eric, those two are not mutually exclusive.
I mean, what I'm wondering here is I'm listening to this talk about widening the tax bracket. If you are going to milk a cow, surely, should you not feed it? Here we are talking about alcohol, and we're talking about sorghum products. And we are talking about locally manufactured brews that by and large are considered illegal. Should the government not seek ways of ensuring that these things are fit for human consumption and that they are encouraged to grow, and by so doing, they actually widen the base from which they can actually tax?
Yeah, so that is the point, City, that, look, there is things that we need to do to fix our economy. And some of the things that we do from a tax perspective should help. Many times they don't assist.
Well, let's wait and see what comes out of the National Treasury tomorrow when they go to Parliament and they tell us how they want to spend 2.7. Let me just ask you this final question, Edward. 2.7 trillion shilling budget.
Yeah.
In COVID times, with the kind of environment that we are in, it doesn't appear to me like the government has adjusted anything.
I told you the last time that we are many optimistic people in the country, and so
many of them are the National Treasury.
Look, I think that it's not possible for us to beat this topic enough to figure out whether this 2.7 is realistic or not. But it just does sound that like it's a lot in these times.
I mean, it may be even realistic, but we don't have it.
Yeah, we don't.
Yes. So again, why aren't we making this particular government commensurate? Why is it not commensurate with the cloth that we have? I mean, that's a question I keep asking. What is so difficult about spending 1.5 trillion? Because that is what we have.
Yeah, I look forward to you hosting one of the people from Treasury, and we can ask this question.
Edward Mwachinga, partner at Viva Africa Consulting, thank you very much for speaking to us this morning.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thank you so much, Edward.
A good job.
Asante sana. Have a good one.
Thank you.